The rain had been falling for 2 days straight. The old village of Lesnea was drowning in mud. The wind howled through the cracks of crooked houses. On the very edge stood a house no one dared to enter. The wooden walls leaned, the windows were boarded up, and the roof barely held together. Locals avoided it and spoke in hushed voices whenever it was mentioned. The house was built in the 1930s. A family named Kravtsov once lived there. In 1952, a fire broke out. The wife and young daughter of the owner died. The man himself vanished. People claimed to have seen him a week later, wandering the swamps, muttering to himself, and then he disappeared for good. Since then, the house had remained empty. Several families tried to live there, but none lasted long. They complained about footsteps at night, creaking floorboards, and a chill that lingered even in summer. In 1997, the Ivanov family moved in, Sergei, his wife Marina, and their 12-year-old son, Artyom. They came from the city, hoping to start over. At first, everything seemed fine. But after a month, Artyom began to change. He stopped playing with local kids, became sullen, and often sat by the window, staring at the attic. In his diary later found were these words. At night, someone walks down the hallway. Dad doesn't believe me. Mom says I'm imagining things. But last night, at 2 a.m., someone whispered my name from the darkness. Marina quickly grew exhausted. Dark circles formed under her eyes, and she complained of constant noises at night. Sergei dismissed it as wind. But one night, he woke to the sound of footsteps in the attic. He went up with a flashlight. The attic was empty. Only in the corner stood an old, dusty crib. On October 16th, Marina disappeared. Sergei claimed she had gone to the store and never returned. The police searched the village and the surrounding woods. Nothing. A week later, they found her body in the attic. She had hanged herself. On the wall nearby, written in charcoal, were the words, "Leave." Experts concluded she had been dead for 3 days before she was found. Sergei left with his son the next day. The house was abandoned once more. In 2012, another family moved in, the Sidorovs. A young couple with a little girl. Neighbors rarely saw them. The windows of the house would glow in the evenings, and then suddenly went dark. A month later, they were reported missing. Inside the house, there were no signs of a struggle. Only on a dusty mirror in the hallway, someone had written with a finger, "They are with me." Since then, the house has been boarded up. But teenagers sometimes sneak inside. One of them once said, "We went up to the attic. It was dark, dusty. Suddenly, someone walked across the boards behind us. I turned. In the corner stood a woman, her hair covering her face, her arms hanging at her sides. We ran. The next day, my friend disappeared. They never found him. Another boy later took his own life, leaving behind a note. I hear her at night." Today, the house still stands on the edge of Lesnea village. The police believe all the disappearances are the work of people. But locals say otherwise. The house is alive. It waits for those who enter, and those who never leave. If you ever find yourself in the Penza region and see a crooked house with boarded-up windows, walk past it. Because, as the villagers say, it's waiting for new residents. Late October. 4 friends, Emma, James, Clara, and Daniel, arrive at an abandoned house that once belonged to Emma's grandfather. They plan to spend the weekend away from the city. The house stands on the edge of a withered marshland locals call the Drowned Hollow. The nearby village is nearly deserted. As they walk past, an elderly man with sunken eyes grabs Emma's sleeve. Don't stay past nightfall. It calls to those who listen. Emma laughs it off, assuming he's just another eccentric villager. Inside, the house smells of damp wood and mold. The floor creaks underfoot. They find old furniture covered in sheets, a locked cellar door in the kitchen floor, and a single family portrait on the wall. Emma's grandfather, standing stiffly beside a small, pale child with blackened feet. James jokes about ghost kids. Clara records everything on her phone for fun. Daniel starts a fire in the old fireplace. Outside, the marsh emits low, gurgling sounds as if something is shifting beneath it. As darkness falls, the wind outside dies completely. The world becomes unnaturally silent. They eat dinner by candlelight, but midway through, Clara stops laughing and tilts her head. "Do you hear that?" From the direction of the marsh comes a faint, drawn-out humming, like a low voice singing underwater. Daniel jokes it's the wind. Emma, uneasy, locks all doors. At midnight, James wakes to the sound of wet footsteps dragging across the wooden porch. The next morning, they find prints in the mud outside, long, narrow, like human footprints but without toes. Daniel insists they should check the marsh. They trek through the brittle reeds and find strange offerings, children's shoes, rusted toys, and a wooden cross half sunken in mud with the words carved. "For the taking." Clara films it all, laughing nervously. When they return, the cellar door in the house is unlocked. None of them touched it. They open the cellar door. A damp, narrow stairway leads down. The air reeks of stagnant water. At the bottom, they find dozens of jars filled with cloudy water, each containing small, shriveled objects, fingers, perhaps? Suddenly, Clara screams. Something moves in the water pooled in the corner. A pale, emaciated hand briefly emerges, then slips back under. They flee upstairs. Emma demands they leave immediately, but Daniel insists it's just old junk and animals. On October 16th, Marina disappeared. Sergei claimed she had gone to the store and never returned. The police searched the village and the surrounding woods. Nothing. A week later, they found her body in the attic. She had hanged herself. On the wall nearby, written in charcoal, were the words, "Leave." Experts concluded she had been dead for 3 days before she was found. Sergei left with his son the next day. The house was abandoned once more. In 2012, another family moved in, the Siderovs. A young couple with a little girl. Neighbors rarely saw them. The windows of the house would glow in the evenings, and then suddenly went dark. A month later, they were reported missing. Inside the house, there were no signs of a struggle. Only on a dusty mirror in the hallway, someone had written with a finger, "They are with me." Since then, the house has been boarded up. But teenagers sometimes sneak inside. One of them once said, "We went up to the attic. It was dark, dusty. Suddenly, someone walked across the boards behind us. I turned. In the corner stood a woman, her hair covering her face, her arms hanging at her sides. We ran. The next day, my friend disappeared. They never found him." Another boy later took his own life, leaving behind a note. "I hear her at night." By morning, the house is silent again. The marsh outside ripples gently, as if exhaling. There is no trace of Emma, her friends, or the house itself, only an empty stretch of black water where the land used to be. Villagers say the drowned hollow grows larger every year, and sometimes, when the wind dies, you can hear voices beneath the surface, calling for anyone who will listen. Late autumn. 4 friends, Lydia, Ethan, Nora, and Caleb, set out to hike in a dense forest far from the nearest town. Locals call it the Forest of Whispering Roots, where the ground is always thick with fallen leaves and the air is damp and earthy. As they step onto the narrow trail, Ethan notices twisted tree roots along the path, almost forming patterns on the ground. An old villager had warned him. "The forest remembers who walks here. Don't linger after sunset." Lydia laughs, eager for adventure. They reach a small clearing and set up camp. Smoke from the fire drifts through the trees, and the crackling embers sound unnaturally loud. They unpack supplies, a small tent, backpacks, and flashlights. Caleb examines the soil near the fire and notices depressions, almost like tiny footprints pressed into the earth. Nora jokes. "Maybe forest fairies live here." Ethan frowns but tries to shake off his unease. As night falls, an eerie calm settles over the forest. No wind, no animal sounds, only the crackling of their fire. Then, faint murmurs arise, not voices, but low, gurgling noises, like water moving through mud. Lydia turns to the others. "Do you hear that?" Caleb says it must be a river nearby, but there is no river. The noises continue intermittently, rising and falling like whispers from the soil. While gathering firewood, Ethan notices the roots around the clearing shifting slightly. At first subtle, then unmistakable, one root lifts, curling toward him. He yells, pointing, but the others see nothing. Back at camp, they see small depressions appearing in the soft soil near the tent, fresh, as if tiny hands had reached up from the earth. Nora refuses to sleep, pacing around the fire. The whispers grow louder after midnight. Lydia sees the roots of a massive oak twisting unnaturally, almost reaching toward the sky. Caleb notices soil moving around the fire, slowly forming hollow shapes. Suddenly, a deep, wet rumble comes from the ground, as if something massive is crawling beneath the surface. The fire flickers. Roots stretch across the ground unnaturally, not moving themselves, but as if the earth itself were breathing. Ethan tries to wake the others. "We have to leave. Now!" They grab their gear, but every path they take seems to lead back to the same clearing. The whispers now form words, distorted but clear. "Stay, stay, join the roots." Nora screams as her feet sink slightly into the soft soil, as if invisible hands are dragging her down. The ground beneath them seems to pulse, softening like mud mixed with water. Lydia grabs Nora's hand, trying to pull her free, but the soil holds fast. Caleb yells, pounding his fists, trying to free her, but the roots themselves seem to tighten around their legs. The whispers become urgent, almost screaming. join us, forever." The friends stumble toward the edge of the clearing, but the forest stretches impossibly, the trees seeming to close in, roots curling toward them. Panic sets in. They run blindly, only to find themselves back at the clearing. The soft ground now rises like waves, hands of mud and roots gripping ankles, pulling them down. Caleb is the first to be pulled beneath the soil. He screams, arms flailing, before disappearing entirely, leaving only a splash of dark, muddy water. Ethan tries to save him but is dragged down as well. Lydia and Nora cling to each other, screaming in terror. Nora suddenly vanishes, pulled below the writhing ground, leaving Lydia alone. She stumbles backward, heart pounding, as roots snap like jaws around her feet, dragging her down inch by inch. Lydia's screams echo through the forest as the ground closes over her. The whispers grow softer, almost satisfied, then fade. Silence returns. The clearing is empty, still, and the forest seems to breathe gently in the moonlight. No trace of Lydia, Nora, Caleb, or Ethan remains. Only the ground is marked with shallow depressions where the soil had moved, as if the forest had swallowed them whole. The villagers who live on the forest's edge shake their heads knowingly. The forest of whispering roots takes what it wants, and never gives back.